Breaking news. Ontario high school students have been found to have the lowest student performance outcomes in decades, and is currently 30% below the national average. This is a provincial emergency. Premier Doug Ford and his cabinet are looking for a change, particularly in switching up classroom sizes. We have invited those most affected by the proposed policy changes here today to discuss if classroom size matters in relation to student outcomes amongst secondary students. First, we have Lucy Smith, who has done profound research on its impacts on students' test scores.
For both traditional and online secondary schools, I believe that class size matters. Following Maimonides' Rule of 40, researchers have found that smaller class sizes are correlated with more chances of score manipulation by teachers. In studies set in Italy, it is found that teachers are more likely to manipulate standardized tests, specifically dishonest transcriptions of handwritten answer sheets, onto machine-readable score report forms when there's a lack of social constraint by peers. This behavior is even more likely to occur in areas where there are weaker worker performance standards set in place. On the other hand, in a 4-year national study in the U.S., smaller high school classrooms were a significant predictor of students' strong college science performance and led to higher adult earnings. However, it is well documented that a school shift to an online setting with our pre-existing knowledge of how class size affects student grades also changes. Researchers showed a statistically significant result for science, math, social science, and art classes, a trend in which final grades increase as class sizes increase in an online learning environment, with the optimal online class occurring around 35 to 42 students. So, if Ford wants to better the school system, I believe he should highly consider changing up class sizes as suggested, as smaller class sizes lead to higher test scores and earning potential in an in-person classroom. But they have to be careful to implement restrictions in order to avoid score manipulation by teachers. But if social distancing is still a major contributing factor next year and there is a need for online classes still, larger classrooms are suggested as that leads to higher grades in an online learning environment.
In 2002, in Seoul, South Korea, a large-scale class size reduction policy was implemented in secondary schools. Researchers found that the college scholastic ability test scores for the years prior to the class size reduction and following the class size reduction had very little change despite any factors that may have influenced grades, such as students changing schools or teachers taking a few years to adjust their curriculum to better accommodate the new class size. There was also no significant change among low socioeconomic students' grades, and since almost every high school student in Seoul takes the CSAT, whether they attend college or not, it is evident that class size does not matter in secondary school. Ford should not be placing his focus on changing high school classroom sizes, but rather focus on other factors that may be impacting these low scores. For instance, an emphasis on the educators teaching these students would be a better use of his resources, as they have the largest and most direct impact on them.
Ford's focus on class size is vital to improving high school students' grades. My colleagues and I recently conducted a study on the effects of class size reduction on secondary students in England, and found that although students who were performing well in school prior to any class size reduction were not impacted by the change, low attainment students had significant improvement in their performance as they spent more time on task when in smaller class sizes compared to more time off task when in larger class sizes. The substantial effect of a class size reduction on low attainment students' grades would thus improve overall high school student grades. To support this, Nancy, one of the students who was part of this research, has joined me to discuss her results when her class size is reduced.
I fully agree that Ford should be focusing on class size to improve student grades. Personally, whenever I'm in larger classes, I have a harder time focusing and don't perform as well as I do in smaller class sizes where I can have more one-on-one time with my teachers. I find that this is true for me and all my friends who already have a hard time in class, as we tend to get more distracted in larger class sizes. Since it's important to be inclusive, having smaller classes, even if it does not benefit students who perform well in larger classes, would benefit students like me, which in turn would raise the average student grades since we're being the most heavily affected by the large class sizes.
I'm not saying high school class sizes don't matter, but it plays such a minuscule part in impacting student outcomes, and is definitely not what the Ford government's educational policy changes should focus on. Research has shown that how school system inputs are used matter much more than the amount of school inputs. This means things like instruction time and how different resources are implemented in the classroom are significantly more important than class size in high school. It's about how well a student is engaged, not how many students there are. And this is simply things within the school that we have control over. Every student is different, comes from different familial, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds. They have different histories and upbringings, which is all going to affect their education. These are all factors that are going to impact student performance, and these factors aren't going to change because a student has less or more students around them. In fact, meta-analyses have shown that out of all the education production function inputs, both factors within and beyond the school system, expenditures per student and class size have the least impact on student performance. Expenditures per student and class size, both factors of the amount of school inputs. The evidence suggests that we're focusing on the wrong factors here.
I'd like to express that class size matters a lot in terms of addition or reduction in expenditures on student resources, teacher salaries, and building space if class sizes were to increase or decrease. Some research has suggested that smaller class sizes lead to better student performance. However, given that smaller class sizes would mean an additional cost, mainly through hiring more teachers, this would take away the budget to student resources such as school supplies, club funding, and comfortable classroom spaces that play a part in student success. An analysis done by Harris in class size and school size, taking the trade-offs off seriously, suggests that reducing class size would increase test scores by 0.05 of standard deviation, but would also require 1287 in additional expenditures per pupil. Therefore, reducing class size may counter student outcomes as it takes away the budget from essential resources. Whether class sizes should be made smaller or larger also depends on the school size, as the fixed costs associated with dividing up smaller class sizes are more spread out, which reduces the cost per pupil. At the same time, if there are more students at the school, they will have higher operating costs to run the school. Therefore, when deciding whether or not to reduce class size, Ford should ensure that the budget for such policies implemented would not offset the crucial resources students need to achieve high performances.
Superintendent, when making decisions to better the overall performance of students, research has shown that classroom sizes actually have a minimal effect, and what we should really be looking at is teacher quality. Taking an overview look at significant studies done in the research from the STAR project, research done by Angus and Levy, and overall studies that compare Western versus non-Western countries, for example, there is an inconclusive opinion as to whether class sizes make an impact, but what is consistent in research is teacher quality. For instance, when a reduction in class size was implemented in California, a 2002 study done by Jepson and Refkin showed that this caused teacher quality to decrease as a result of immediate hiring, and therefore caused lower student outcome. A Waldman and West study done in that same year, but across 40 countries, backed this finding when they examined that less capable teachers performed well in smaller settings, but not so much in larger settings. Therefore, when looking at research that stated classroom sizes had an impact, a big contributing factor as to why that's the case is in the appreciation or depreciation of teacher quality. Furthermore, when Hargreaves, Galton, and Pell conducted an experiment in 1998, observing 14 high-quality teachers and them in classrooms of different sizes, they measured an insignificant difference in student performance because they were able to adapt their teaching strategies to new situations. As superintendent, I would suggest implementing policies that eliminate less qualified teachers while overall better training teachers to adapt to the inevitable changing environments in classrooms.
While the Ford government has not yet confirmed what the policy changes are going to be, it appears the change in high school classroom sizes has caused quite the turmoil throughout Ontario, with many people agreeing with the government that high school class sizes are an important factor in impacting student performance. There are also a number of people who argue that class size bears no impact on student performance in high school. The cabinet has been in discussion surrounding the effect changes in high school class sizes will have on test scores, the community environment for students, the relevance of confounding factors such as family, cultural, and socioeconomic backgrounds, the financial burdens this would impose on the province, and the quality of our educators. The conversations appear to be continuing, with no final decision being determined. The question remains, does class size in high school really matter? Tweet us your thoughts using the hashtag #HighSchoolClassSizeDebate. I'm Joe Johnson at UTSC 4.0. Thank you for watching.